Every day, millions of people drive past these. Some are bolted to telephone poles. Some hang over intersections. Others are tucked away on quiet neighborhood streets, where you'd never think to look. Most people never notice them, but they notice you. Not your face, not who's driving, but your license plate, your car, and anything unique about it. The exact time, location, and direction at which you were traveling. One camera capable of that is not particularly interesting, but hundreds of them, thousands of them even, now that is a very different story. Imagine driving to work Monday morning. You stop for coffee, you pick up your kid after school, you run to the grocery store, you visit a friend, and then head home. Without realizing it, you've created a breadcrumb trail of your entire day. A map that can be searched later. Not because your phone was tracking you, which that's a topic for another day, but because the roads were. Now, before anyone starts wrapping their car in aluminum foil, this is where things get very interesting. This same technology has helped police recover kidnapped children. It has also aided in locating missing elderly with dementia, catching murder suspects, and finding stolen vehicles. There are families alive today because this system works. So what's the problem? Well, what happens when a tool designed to catch criminals starts gathering information on everyone else too? Who decides how that information is used? Who gets access to it? And more importantly, who watches the watchers? Today we are talking about flock safety, a technology that has become one of the most effective crime-fighting tools in America, and also one of its most controversial. Let's start with what these cameras actually are. Flock cameras are what's called an automatic license plate reader, or ALPR for short. Every time a vehicle passes one of these cameras, it captures an image. It reads the license plate and records the date, time, and location. It also identifies things like make, model, color, or other distinguishable characteristics of your vehicle, so it does not mix up your clapped out Honda Civic with your neighbor's clapped out Honda Civic. Think of it like a digital notebook. One camera writes down one observation. That's all. The observation by itself is not really that interesting, but imagine driving downtown. You pass another camera, and another, and another. Each one of those cameras writing down another observation. Now, instead of one page in a notebook, you have a timeline. And that is where things get interesting. Because if investigators are looking for a stolen vehicle, a kidnapping suspect, or someone who just fled the scene of a violent crime, that timeline can be incredibly useful. Instead of just hoping that someone remembers seeing a vehicle or certain characteristics of it, police can simply just search for it. If the plate was observed by any of these cameras, police will then be able to determine when and where this was observed, and more importantly, where it potentially is going. That ability has helped recover stolen vehicles, locate missing people, and assist in criminal investigations across the country. Those are real successes. I know I have certainly spoken my opinion about this topic before in several other videos. Hell, you can't even take a shit now without like 6 flock cameras trying to count all the wrinkles on your asshole. But if we are going to have an honest discussion today, we have to acknowledge that. Because pretending this technology has never done anything good would just be inaccurate. But like every powerful tool created, it inevitably raises a difficult question. The question is not whether it works, but whether it's being used appropriately. Like a hammer can build a house, or it can break a window. The hammer isn't making that decision, the person behind it is. And that is where this story starts taking a very different turn. Over the past few years, several officers across the United States have been accused of using this flock system for things other than solving crimes. It's not because the camera malfunctioned, or because someone hacked the system, but because someone that was sitting behind the keyboard decided to use it for something it was never intended to do. And that is where this episode really begins. These are not rumors from social media. These are documented cases that resulted in internal investigations, officers being fired, resignations, and in some instances, criminal charges. Let's start in Georgia. According to reportings by Reason, a supervisor with the Conyers Police Department Real-Time Crime Center was arrested after investigators alleged that she had used the flock system more than 30 times to search for a vehicle belonging to her domestic partner. Not a murder suspect, not a kidnapping situation, not even a person of interest, just a person exploiting this technology for their own personal use. And this was not the only case. Georgia has already seen multiple incidents of alleged misuse of the flock system by law enforcement. Now, to Flock's credit, the company claims that its routine audits are what helped uncover its misuse. In other words, every search leaves a trail. And that's important, because without those audit logs, many of these cases would have not come to light. But critics quickly point out another question. If a system can only detect misuse after it happens, hasn't someone's privacy already been violated? It's kind of like finding fingerprints at a burglary. Incredibly useful to find out who did it, but did absolutely nothing to prevent it. And that is where the conversation starts shifting. Because this isn't really about cameras anymore. It's about accountability. Who is allowed to access this information? What reasons do they need? Who reviews those searches? And what happens when someone crosses the line? Those questions become harder to ignore when similar stories started appearing across state lines. In Alabama, an officer in the Moody Police Department was terminated following an investigation of potential misuse of the Flock system. The department emphasized that there was no data breach and that all the safeguards worked as they should. And because of those safeguards working as intended, the audit discovered the misuse. The department is not releasing the former officer's name or any details about the violation, citing that it's due to personnel policies. Which I get that, but the lack of details on that actually bothers me even more so. Like, if it wasn't that serious, I feel like you would have just said what it was to cover your ass, you know? Just a few miles away in Springville, another officer resigned after an audit caught them using the system to follow a family member. Again, the technology itself was not malfunctioning, and the audit trail was doing exactly what it's supposed to do. But once again, the same uncomfortable question came to surface. If the audit catches misuse after it already happened, is that enough? Or should there be stronger safeguards to protect this information in the first place? And before anyone says, well, just like one bad apple, you know, the pattern does not stop there. In South Carolina, 2 employees of the Greenville Sheriff's Department were fired after alleged misuse of the Flock safety system. And at the same time, 2 officers with the Greer Police Department also lost their jobs for similar allegations involving Flock. Greenville County Sheriff Hobart Lewis did not try to act like nothing happened. He acknowledged that his employees violated people's rights. But at the same time, he did defend the technology itself, because from his perspective, the audit worked. The misconduct was identified, the employees were terminated. And that's really the heart of this entire debate. Supporters point to these cases and say, see, the safeguard worked. Whereas critics look at the exact same case and say, yes, safeguards worked after someone's privacy was violated. Same facts, 2 very different conclusions. And honestly, that's a much harder conversation than just simply asking if cameras are good or bad. Because almost everyone agrees unanimously there should be more severe consequences for people that violate their privacy through those systems. The disagreement is really whether the current safeguards are enough. Personal opinion sidebar here, I try to stay semi-neutral when we're doing these little like breakdown things, but all I can think is like, okay, if one of those officers was stalking somebody, sure, the audits ran, they are terminated. But guess what? That information is still here, and that person that they cyberstalked will never feel at ease until they have to like fucking move. That's ridiculous. It's like the toothpaste thing, like once it's out of the tube, you can't put it back in. Anyway, I'm gonna try to stay neutral and we're gonna keep this informative, probably. So how much information are we talking about? Quite a bit, actually. Flock's network has expanded drastically over the last several years. Thousands of cameras have been installed all over the country. Every day, those cameras make millions of observations. When enough of those observations are collected over days, weeks, or even a month, they begin to paint a surprisingly detailed picture. Where you work, where you go to the gym, what days you go to the grocery store, the route you take home every day. Again, this is not because a PI is tracking you, you just happen to walk by a camera that was already there. And that is where privacy advocates begin raising concerns. Organizations like ACLU and even the Institute for Justice argue that even if every observation is collected legally, putting all of those observations together creates something much more powerful than the individual pieces. Think about a puzzle. One piece tells you almost nothing, but additional pieces, you get a whole picture. And that is a concern. It's not just that one camera exists. Hell, we have all lived with security cameras essentially our whole lives, and no one really gives a shit. Outside of once in a while, I like to have a little stare down with the Walmart self-checkout, just so like, I like to pretend the guy in the back room and I are just like having a moment. And I'm just like buying the Courage the Cowardly Dog box set or something. Anyway, it's the thousands of cameras working together now reveal patterns about innocent bystanders that have done nothing wrong. Supporters see it differently. They're arguing that if you are driving on a public road, everyone can already see the vehicle and you driving it. A police officer, another driver, person walking their dog, they've all seen you driving. This is not creating new information. It is simply recording what anyone could have observed. And critics respond with one simple question. Sure, couple people might see my car drive by, but can they remember everywhere I've been over the last 30 days? Can they instantly search through millions of observations? Can they trace my routine in a matter of seconds? That is the difference. Not visibility, memory. Technology has given us something that humans have never had before: perfect recall. A camera doesn't forget, a notebook does not get tired. A database does not confuse one Tuesday with another. It simply remembers. And depending on your perspective, that is either an incredible investigating tool or a very uncomfortable amount of surveillance. Hell, maybe both. But here's the thing, most of us want police to reasonably have every tool to help find like a kidnapped child, stop a violent criminal, whatever. I know I do. But it's also not unreasonable to expect these tools to have limits, because history has shown us that when people are given access to extraordinary information, someone is going to eventually test those boundaries.
I see a suit of armor around the world. Sounds like a cold world.
So where does that leave us? Honestly, somewhere kind of in the middle, because after digging through all these cases, you can't really sit here and say that the cameras are like inherently good or bad by nature. The truth is they're both incredibly useful and incredibly powerful. And if history has taught us anything, it is that every powerful technology has forced society to ask the same question. It's never been, can we build it? It's, how should we use it? We've asked that question about the internet, artificial intelligence, facial recognition, and now we're asking about automated license plate readers. The Constitution was written long before computers, long before the internet, and definitely long before anyone could have imagined a nationwide network of cameras tracking everyone's vehicles. That does not automatically make it unconstitutional, although I do have my grievances, but it does mean the conversation is still evolving. Courts continue to wrestle with where privacy ends and where public observation ends, and what expectations we should reasonably have while traveling on public roads. Which brings me back to a movie that came out about 20 years ago, The Dark Knight. Batman builds a surveillance system to capture the Joker by turning every cell phone in Gotham into a giant listening device. The system worked. It helped save lives. It gave Batman the exact information he needed to save the day. But when Lucius Fox discovered what Batman had created, he is anything but impressed. He tells Bruce, no one man should have that power. And Batman agrees. In fact, he agrees so much that he blows the entire thing up after it's used. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded. And that, I think, is the real lesson. The danger was never within the technology itself. It's the possibility that someone someday may use it without accountability. That same question exists today, and not just with Flock. It's with every surveillance technology that we create. Perfect example, Denver, Colorado successfully pushed Flock out. They do not have Flock there anymore. But guess what? The company Axon that does like body cameras, tasers, among, I'm sure, a million other things, they took over all the Flock spots. They replaced the Flock cameras with their own. It's also worth noting that this happened after President Trump put a $5 million investment into Axon in February. Also, Axon is backed by BlackRock. So even if we successfully push out Flock, the Hydra is just growing another more politically motivated head. And it's happening right under our noses. How much power are we comfortable giving to the people that are supposed to protect us? And just as importantly, who makes sure they're using it responsibly? Because the officers who do incredible work every day deserve every tool possible to solve crimes. And the public deserves confidence knowing that those tools will not be abused. Those ideas do not compete with each other, they depend on each other. And I think that's the real conversation that we should be having. It's not whether the technology should exist, but it's making sure that there is a way to make sure it is serving the public without eroding away our freedoms. It also inherits the responsibility of watching the people entrusted to use this. Because after all, who watches the watchers? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I tried to keep my personal opinions out of this one, but frankly, fuck Flock. If you would like to see where your local Flocks are, you can go to dflock.org. Ironically enough, the surveillance company Flock really gets pissed off that deflock is a thing, which is hilarious. So they can watch us, but we cannot watch them. That's enough spice for today. If you would like to pick up some super sweet merch, head on over to purplephosphor.com. I got a couple new things just for this occasion. That's all I have for you today. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.